Hi, this is Roger in Finland, and today we're gonna have a small introduction for absolute beginners to Fusion in Davinci Resolve. And to do that, I'm gonna show you an example by doing something like this. Let's blur the image a little bit. Then let's add the title somewhere here. And then let's move this blur button there, because now it's an unblur button. So, let's do this. Today's video doesn't have a for the impatient ones section, so it is a kind of a global introduction. I might have some short videos for the impatient ones on the formal Monday tidbits, but today we're just giving a broad introduction. And what Fusion is a node-based compositing software. I have been using it to put some visual effects into some short films, and then into doing some introduction sections like this one. There is a standalone version, but a couple of versions ago on Davinci Resolve, they have put it also in Davinci Resolve as its own tab, and that's what we're trying to cover and explain today, since it's quite useful, even though it has lots of things that might look a little bit scary if you've never used node-based compositing software or compositing software in general. So now let's hop into Davinci Resolve, where I'm going to be giving the introduction at the same time that showing how did we do that silly blurring and blurring video from the beginning. So now here we are in Davinci Resolve 17.4.5, and here I have this compound clip which I did cut right before I click on the button, and then it ends also in the other click where we're going to want to add the blur, take the blur away, and do our Fusion composition. To go into Fusion, I put the playhead on top of the clip I want to work in, and then I go to the Fusion tab, which is this magic wand, and it's a Fusion. Now, before getting into the composition itself and the tutorial on how to use it, let's take a little bit of a look at the user interface. Here on the left side, we still have the media pool and some of these effects that we can access. If I hide it, then it hides us in the other tabs. I can resize things, and here what we have is two viewers. On the bottom we have our node tree, and on the right hand side then we have the inspector, which is showing the properties of whichever node we have selected. Now we can see here this timeline that we can scroll, and it starts at the beginning of that clip and it ends at the end of that clip. Exactly. Here we have the beginning and the end, and here we have the frame that we are in. Then we have these two viewers, and let's check quickly how to put the things into them so that we can see them. I have this media in, and I would like to see what this is in this viewer one. So basically what I do is I drag this node into the viewer, and then it appears there. Another way to activate a node into a viewer is clicking the keys either number 1 or number 2 in your keyboard, and that will add that node or remove it from that viewer. And you can see here in the bottom that there's these two balls, one white, one black. It means that it's activated in viewer number 1, but not in viewer number 2. And now let's take a look. I'm in media in 1. If I click number 2, it also appears in number 2. If I click number 2 again, it goes away from there. Now nothing is in that viewer. But then let's take a quick look at what these nodes are. So now I have my media in, my media out. I'm going to put the media out in the end, and we'll see how this works. Every node has inputs and output in singular, inputs potentially in plural. To know what an input does, you just hover over it, and it's going to show a piece of information telling you what it is. In this case, it's an effect mask, which we can add masks. This will come in later tutorials. This square bit on every node, that's the output, and if you hover to it, it's going to tell you that this is the output and what is connected to. In this case, is the input from our media out. And this arrow signifies that this media in node is piped to media out. Because we will want to blur this image, let me add a blur node, so I can also show you how to add nodes. A couple of ways to do it. One of them is by right-clicking in here, clicking at Add Tool, and then you go and find your tool. In our case, is this blur. The other method, which I prefer, is after I have clicked with the left button somewhere here, if I do now Control Space, I get this tool selection where all the tools are listed here alphabetically. And here you have a search box. So if you know what you're looking for, this is a bit easier. I'm gonna just write blur. I'm gonna select blur, click add. And now you can see that we have added this blur. You can also see that it's floating around and there's nothing connected to it. To connect something to this blur node, I go out, for instance, from the media out into that blur node. And here let's put blur at, I don't know, let's say 15. Now the good question is, how come nothing is blurred here? Well, in the first viewer we're seeing media in, nothing has happened to it. In the viewer 2 we're seeing media out, which just has information piped from the initial node. So if we want to see what comes out from the blur node, we need to connect that one instead. And now we can see what is happening there. So now we have our blur node. Then what we're going to do is add a button, which actually is an animation, is a short clip that I have here. And now that's going to allow me also to show you how to add other media into the same composition. So I'm just going to go to my media pool. I have it here, is this button render, and I'm just going to drag it in here. And now you can see that we have this media in too. If you want to take a look at what this media 2 is, let me hide the media pool. I'm going to click number 1, and now we can see it in there. And if I scroll along the timeline, we can see what this is. It's basically a percentage progress bar, and when it hits 100, it stays at 100. So how do I add this to this media out? We need to use something as the background, and we want to use this as a foreground. And the node to do that is called merge, and it's one of the most useful nodes to do any basic stuff. I'm going to add 2 merge nodes before and after the blur, so I can explain you a little bit better how this piping works. So now I'm just going to click Control Space after I have selected media 1. Clear here, I write merge. I select this merge, the normal merge, and I add it. I'm going to add another merge after blur, same thing, Control Space, merge, and here it is. And you can see that this merge node, it has a background, foreground, a mask that we were not going to touch today, and an output. So what happens if I add this media into the merge that is before the blur? You can see that now that thing is also blurred because everything that happens before the blur is piped into it. We didn't want that. What we wanted actually was this. I'm going to add now the media into the second merge just by clicking and dragging from the output to the foreground. And now this is how we wanted it. Now that we have a node that we don't need and we don't want here, we're going to remove it, and you just select the node, click delete on your keyboard. That node is deleted and the path is restored on its own. So that's just practical. You don't need to worry about deleting nodes and what happens to the paths. Then where to place this thing, because it's way too big, it's in the middle, and if you remember, I was trying to do something like this. So I'm going to go to the very beginning. I can see more or less where I'm going to be trying to click. So let's go to the frame where I do click, and it's there, right there. So now, how to place this thing? An easy way of modify and manipulate media, the size of it, is by adding a transform node right after it before where it pipes. I select this media 2, Control Space, transform, and it's this transform XF. I can add it here, and now this will allow me to adjust the shape and the size and whatnot. So let's make this smaller. And how am I making it smaller? Right now I did click and drag the number itself on the size. Another way is to click and drag the size slider, and another way still is to basically drag from the corner so it keeps the proportions within the screen itself. So maybe something like this is good. Now how to move it? I could move basically the center point again by clicking and dragging here in the inspector, but I would prefer to do it visually there. So here, a couple of things. If I click and hold exactly in the middle, that center, I can move that whole transform node. If I click on the arrow, which is horizontal, it will move only horizontally regardless of my vertical movement of the mouse, and then the opposite happens with this up and down arrow. But now let's click the center, let's place it where I want it to be, and now it's in the correct spot. One problem is that now this is at 42% and I wanted it to activate exactly on click. So let's see how we do that. I'm going to put my media in into the first viewer, so I'm precise with what frame do I want that thing to start. And as you can see, I'm about to click, and then I move my finger out, so this is the correct frame. So now what I'm going to do is go to my media in 2, and here I can see that it starts, or it should start, sorry I moved it, but it should start at frame 43. So on here where it says global in and global out, if I drag this thing, I can change the starting and end point. And now what I'm going to do is move it there, so the starting point is at 43 and it ends whenever it ends. And now we can see that if I move this, I go back, it will start exactly on click, and then it will go on. This is pretty nice. Let's take a look. And by the way, forgive me, my laptop is from 2019 and even then was not a top of the line, so things will look shaky and it will struggle, but in the end of the video I'm going to show you the full render. So let's take a look. And it appears there. That's great. Now what's not great is that the blur is there all the time, so let's take a look on how to use keyframes. Keyframes, if you're familiar with it, is basically setting a parameter that will change a long time. So now I'm going to go again to frame 43, and to do that I can drag within the timeline, or I can double click here and just write 43, press enter, and it will go exactly to the frame I want. Now that I'm in the frame 43, I'm going to click on my blur, and here I'm going to take all the blur size down to 1, so there's no blur. And here by clicking at this polygon twisted square thingy, it turns orange. This means that we have set a keyframe. When do we want to set the next keyframe? Well, I thought it would be cool if the blur actually goes along with the counter. So if I move this to whenever this will hit 100%, let's see when it was, 98, 99, 100, at this point I want my maximum blur, and I think we were settling at the number 15. I just changed the blur size to 15, click enter, and you can see that now when I change the value of that blur, this thing went again to the color orange, meaning that we do have another keyframe, this time at 15. If I click on the timeline, now later on, we can see that the blur size is 15, there is no keyframe. If I click somewhere here in the between, you can see that the values of the blur size are changing, and basically they are moving from 0 to 15 along the lines. One practical thing on how to navigate between keyframes, you can see here that now that we have set some, these arrows appear. This means that this will now navigate to the previous keyframe, still to the previous. There's no more previous, but now there is the next one. So this is the way to navigate. And the visual way to know what keyframes do we set is looking at the timeline. If I have selected a node that has keyframes attached to it, they appear in the form of these small white lines. If I select merge, now there's no keyframes. If I select blur, we have 2 keyframes. So now we're pretty happy. We got our blur, but if you remember, there's another click at the very end that makes the blur go away. So let's do that first, because then we will end with the tracker. And I believe that here we have tried or pretended to move the button. And here I'm about to click. Let's see when. Oop. All right, let's go back, forward. That's the frame. At this point, I'm going to set another keyframe at 15. And let's do it so that after 1, 2, 3, 4 frames, just to give it a little bit of life, the blur size goes down. Let's play it all to see how it looks and how it feels, because now we're going to see that we're missing the movement of the button. Let's play this. Button goes, the blur starts to come, the progress bar moves nicely. We're going to add the title text somewhere in there. We're going to move this button, which is a bit more complicated, but we will do it. Here I'm talking about, I can't remember what I was saying, and now this last click and the blur goes away. I'm going to stop this now. Excellent. Next easy thing to do, add in the text. And we can see that here I was pantomiming. Where was it? Now here still moving. There. I'm trying to show, hey, we have a title here. So I'm going to go just before that the title is supposed to appear, and let's add a title. I'm going to move this media out. I'm going to add another merge node after this merge, and here we will want to add text. The text is just called text plus. So if I click here, Control space, and when I say here, I mean where the cursor is right now. And now let's go to text plus. I select it, enter, and here we have it. Now it's not anywhere, we can't see, so I'm going to put it in the viewer number 1 by dragging it to it. There's nothing in there, but here this is the text box that we can type in. So this is going to be some title. Nothing fancier than that. Let's add it to the composition by adding it to the foreground, and maybe it's not where we want it to be. I guess that it should appear somewhere here where I'm showing that. Voila, this is some title that just appeared here. Excellent. The problem is that we didn't want it to be there all the time, so how to get it there when we want? Let's set keyframes to the merge node. Here it should start appearing just before I show my hands. So I'm going to go to my merge node, set the blend to 0, which is what blends the foreground towards the background. Set a keyframe, move a few frames forward, 1, 2, 3, 4 maybe, and let's put the blend at 1. Let's take a look at this, and voila, some title appeared. And we're going to leave it there, nothing else. Now my fingers are about to start moving the button, and this is probably the most complicated thing we're going to be doing today. It's a bit of an extra, but let's go through it. We want to move this button according to the movement of my hand in this bit. Because this is blurred, I'm going to put my media in the first node. It's a little bit easier for me to see. And let's see which part of my hand movement do we want to track. So basically I'm lifting my finger, clicking and dragging it down. So we want to start moving right after that click. I'm gonna now go to that frame, and this is the click. So what I'm going to do now is basically reduce the starting point and end point of this by dragging the beginning of my composition to that particular frame, and you'll see in a moment why. And now I want to know when does this supposed to end. The drag goes down and it stays there. This is frame 206, because after that I start moving my fingers. So let's go back to frame 206 and let's move the end of the composition. You can do this in two ways. One is by dragging this end bit, sorry about that. The other one is by clicking here and adjusting that number or writing what frame do you want it. So I'm going to do it this way because it feels easier. There we go. Now my composition moves only through this dragged bit, as you can see. If I go to the first frame, it goes to the first frame of this selection. Now what I'm going to do is at the tracker node in here, I click somewhere there because I don't want it attached anywhere yet. Control space, tracker. The tracker node on itself, it probably requires a full session or a full series of videos, so we're going to do something very, very simple today. I'm going to attach the output of my media into the input of the tracker. I'm going to put this tracker on my fingers because this is what I want to track. Let's make it a little bit bigger, maybe like that. And now I'm gonna put actually the tracker on the node number 2, just for fun. And now that we have the tracker there, you can see here in the inspector that this is the image based on contrast in this time around, because I have it selected there, that is going to try to track. And it's gonna try to find the points just between these two frames. So between 173 and 205. Or what was it supposed to? 206. To start the tracker, I will click on this, and now I might have to speed this up in post, so see you in a moment. Yeah, this is what was not sped up, so it just took 4 seconds. Again, it's tracking 7 frames per second, so it's fairly slow, but this was a really small move. And you can see that now we have points across this path for each frame. If I go to a different frame, you can see where the tracker is. It was a really easy case for the computer, for me, so that's easy to do. I'm gonna move this back for my whole composition. And now the question is, how do we apply what the tracker has as the information of position to my button? Let's put the media out in the viewer too. I'm gonna click on the tracker to show it there, that it's tracking. And let me show how to do this. Remember that to modify the position of this, how's this called? A button with the progress bar, we're using this transform node. So what we actually want is to have the center of the node connected to the tracker. Let me do one thing, which is I'm going to move that button a little bit more up so that it starts somewhere there. And I think that's okay from the clicking perspective. I click a little bit below in the button, but that's okay. Let's go here in the middle so we can show you how this works. In the transform node, what I want to do now is connect the center point to the tracker position. To do that, I'm going to click on the center, between the X and Y, somewhere here, right click, connect to tracker 1, which is the tracker that we used, and the other one that I have here, tracker 1 path connected to its position. And now you can see that while here it has the position that it had at the beginning, now it's connected to the tracker, and therefore it will move with it. Then it stays there. Hopefully we're gonna click on it somewhere in the middle, and then it will just work. Let's take a look from the beginning. Now the transform is selected with all the paths. I'm gonna click somewhere else so nothing is selected, and this is easier to watch. And let's see how it looks. Click the button, progress bar, the blur nicely progressing, soon showing the silly title. It appears there. Then I was talking about something else. Click on the button, drag it down, and now that it's in the new position, it's the unblur button. Click on it and unblur. Does it look good? Just to make it a bit more dramatic, we could do so that the button reacts to the last push. What do you say? That last push, where does it happen? Well, I know that it happens alongside the blur. So basically I'm gonna take a look at the blur keyframes by selecting the blur and checking that it happens there. I know that this is exactly the moment where the button is pushed. So I think what we could do is that the button kind of comes towards us because I'm pushing it from behind the screen, and then it fades away and disappears. And I'm going to use, of course, the size for that. So here I'm going to set a keyframe for the size so it stays there. 2 frames later, I'm going to make it a tiny bit bigger because the push made it grow. And then a few frames later, let's make it just disappear. Let's see how this looks. Click on the button and then disappears. Click on it. This works well. The title appears. click and drag using the tracker information to move the button around, and with the final click this thing will unblur and the button will go away. And we're done. Now when we go back to the edit page, this composition is there. One thing to remember now is that again, my computer isn't great. You can see that there's this red bar that is turning blue as I'm speaking. This is because now this is rendering. As long as it's red, things will choke a little bit. Now that it's blue, it will probably play nicely. So I'm gonna go here and play this bit until the end of the introduction. And here I was talking about something with a... Oh, I wore a different t-shirt. There we go. This works nicely. It's a little bit out of frame, but it doesn't matter because it worked well with the dragging it down. So that's totally fine. And then it went away. And now I'm supposed to show it to you. All right, so let's get out from Davinci Resolve. So what did we learn today? Well, first, what those nodes are, how to pipe things between them, how to see what the inputs and outputs mean. Then we used the blur node. We've been using some keyframes. We've seen how to add more media to the same composition. We saw how the viewers work and how to get things viewed in them. We have used the merge node, which is a really common and really useful one to learn about, how to add some text with Infusion, then how to use the normal transform, which again, it's a really useful node to learn about. And probably many of you were thinking that, hey, we can do all of those things already in the edit page. So that's why I added as a bonus the tracker node, which is pretty useful. And I am planning to make some more videos about Fusion in Davinci Resolve for beginners, from another beginner that has gone through some of the first hurdles. Some of them will be short Monday tidbits, some more complex concepts will be longer videos. But if you have some questions or some ideas or some things that you would like me to cover, please let me know down below so I can try to answer your questions in form of videos. So I hope you liked this video. If you did, please like and subscribe, and we're gonna see you soon for some more Fusion content.